Hey guys, we're on Unit 8 and this is day 5 and we're not learning anything new. We're just have a mixed day of practice. So in our warm-up, it says that the side lengths of the following right triangle are 16, 30, and 34. And an altitude of a right triangle from the right angle splits the hypotenuse into two segments of length x and y. And they want us to find the length of h, x, and y. So there's three variables we have to solve for. So this is going to be a pretty lengthy problem, I think, unless we can find maybe some shortcuts in here. So remember now that we have two formulas that work on this picture. We have pigs are awesome pets, where this is a 1 and this is a 2. And we also have pigs love low hurdles, where these could either be 1s or they could all be 2s. Okay, so let's try our first proportion that we learned. And I think we're going to run into a problem. We don't have projection 1, that's x. We don't have our altitude, that's h. Don't have the altitude and don't have the projection 2. So therefore, this one is 100% out. We don't have anything to substitute into it. So we're going to go down to this one. We'll use pigs love low hurdles that we learned on day 4. And we have to decide if we want to do all 2s or all 1s. And so if we take a look and say, let's try all 1s and see if we have enough information to plug into that one. So do we have a projection 1? Well, x would be my projection 1. So that maybe is the variable we're solving for. 16, therefore, would be my leg 1, and I have that. And my whole hypotenuse here is the 34. And so we'll go ahead and use our pigs love low hurdles with all 1s. And so when we replace projection 1, we'll replace it with the x over my leg 1, which is 16, equal to the same leg 1 of 16 over my whole hypotenuse of 34. Okay. Go ahead and cross multiply, and we end up with 34x equals 16 times 16, which is 256. We'll go ahead and divide by 34, and x comes out to equal, it's an ugly decimal, and that's why there's rounding directions up here. So they say 7.529 ... And so to the nearest tenth, we would say 7 point, look at 5. 5's the spot we're rounding. So we underline it. We look next door at the 2, and it's not going to move the 5 up. So we'll say 7.5. And there is my first answer. I now have solved for x. Okay. So let's go ahead and see what we can solve for next. Okay. And sometimes adding the information that you just found into your picture will also help you. In fact, right now, when I added that 7.5 in, I can do a little math here and do 34 minus 7.5, and I'll end up with y's, and I won't have to do a proportion or anything. Okay? So if I do the subtraction, it comes out to 26.5. And now I can go ahead and put that in my picture. Okay. And you might now see another shortcut. So we could now do pigs are awesome pets and solve for the altitude and go back to that. Or you can also do this. If you notice what we have here is a nice right triangle, and you know 2 of its sides, 16 and that's 7.5 on the bottom, you could use Pythagorean theorem and solve for h. Just make sure you put 16 in for c. Okay. You could also do it on this right triangle and do Pythagorean theorem with 30 and our 26.5 that we just found on the bottom and h. Just make sure 30 goes in for c. So you actually have 3 ways of solving for h now. You could use the proportion, which I'm going to go ahead and use just because that's what we're learning about in these last couple days, so I want to still practice using it. Or you could use Pythagorean theorem with 2 different sets of right triangles. Okay, and so here we go. It doesn't matter which way you pick, just make sure you show your work. All right, so I'm going to go back to pigs are awesome pets, okay, which is up here. And in that proportion, I have P1, and I now know that my P1 is 7.5 over my altitude, which is h, equal to my same altitude, which is what they're calling h, and my P2 is 26.5. I can go ahead and cross multiply. That would give me h squared equal to 7.5 times 26.5, which is 198.75. Okay. We'll go ahead and take the square root. And again, that's not obviously going to be perfect. And so it comes out to be 14.098. Oh, excuse me, 0978. Okay, dot, dot, dot. And because again, the directions say nearest tenth, our h is going to come out to be 14 point, and the 9 is going to round the 0 to a 1. And now I have h and I have y, and all three pieces are solved for. Okay. All right, so that's what we're going to actually be practicing today. Just make sure that we can fluently use our proportions, okay, to find anything that they're asking me to find. So here we go. In number 1, it says find the values of x, y, and z in simplest radical form. Okay, so remember our proportions. We have pigs are awesome pets. And we have pigs love low hurdles. Okay, remember up here is a 1 and a 2. And we can check that one out first. I always usually do. And so when I look at my picture, my 5 can be my P1. Okay? My X could be the piece I'm solving for. And that same X and my P2 I have. And so I have enough information to use this proportion and to solve for X. So let's go ahead and try it. So P1 is going to get replaced with 5. My altitude is going to get replaced with X. Same altitude of X, and my P2 is going to be a 7. When I cross multiply, I end up with x squared equal to 35. I take the square root of both sides, and I'm left with x equals square root of 35. 36 is perfect, but 35 isn't. Okay, and it does say simplest radical form, and so when you find the largest perfect square that goes into 35, you're going to find out that the only perfect square that goes into 35 is 1, and therefore we know it is already as simplest as it can get. Okay, and so now we have one piece found. All right, so what we could do now, we could go ahead and solve for another piece using pigs love low hurdles. Okay, or you can insert your altitude as the square root of 35, and you can notice that you have some right triangles here with two sides known, two legs actually, and you can use the Pythagorean theorem on that green triangle sides and solve for y. Just remember that y would be in the C spot of the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, you could also take a look at this right triangle, and you could use your square root of 35 that you just found, the 7, and put those two pieces in for a and b into the Pythagorean theorem and solve for the C spot, and which is really what C is. Okay, so it is completely up to you how you want to get y and z. Okay, but again, just like the warm-up, I'm going to use my proportions. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to pigs love low hurdles, and I'm going to make these all ones. Okay, and so I'm going to be solving for my leg 1, which is my y piece. Okay, so it says projection 1, which we know is 5. My leg 1 is y, equal to the same leg 1, which is y, over my whole hypotenuse, which we got to do a little adding. 5 plus 7 is 12. And now I can cross multiply and get y squared equal to 5 times 12, which is 60, and then take the square root. Okay. 60 is not perfect, so we break it up into the largest perfect that is, which is 4. Okay. And the other number would be 15. And 4 becomes 2 square root of 15. And there's my answer in simplest radical form. Okay. We have one last piece to find, and that is z. And we're going to use the same proportion, but all of our 1s are now going to become 2s. Okay. And so now we can go ahead and replace our projection 2, okay, with 7 over our leg 2, which we know is z, equal to the same leg 2, which is z, over our whole hypotenuse, which we already added together, and the last one is 12. Okay. When we go ahead and cross multiply, we get z squared equal to 7 times 12, which is 84. We take the square root of 84. Okay. 84 is not perfect, but it breaks up into the largest perfect of 4 and the other number of 21. And the square root of 4 then becomes 2 square root of 21. And that one's finished. Okay. And we ended up with all three pieces that they asked us to find. Okay. So we're going to move on to number 2. And in number 2, looks like we again have 3 pieces to find. Okay? And so we start off with our proportions. We have pigs are awesome pets. And if we look at using this one, we have 25 as our projection 1 and x as our projection 2. Okay? And then our altitude is also unknown. And so we can't have the altitude spots be the variable and the projection 2 being the variable. So I think right now this one's out. We're going to have to rely on pigs love low hurdles. And if we take a look, we could maybe solve for, let's see, if this is P1, that could be the 25. This would be my leg 1 then, which is 65. Same leg 1 of 65, and I could be solving for the whole hypotenuse, which isn't a variable, but if I know the whole hypotenuse, I can find my second projection. Okay. If we switch into all 2s, we will be missing leg 2 and projection 2 in spots in there, and we won't be able to do that. So we're going to have to use this one. All right, so our projection 1 is 25 over leg 1, which is 65, equals the same leg 1, which is 65 again, over our whole hypotenuse. So our whole hypotenuse, how we've been doing is that we add the parts, and so this becomes x plus 25. We cross multiply. 65 times 65 is 4,225 equal to 25 times x is 25x plus 25 times 25 is 625. We'll go ahead and subtract 625. And we end up with 3,600 equal to 25x. Go ahead and divide by 25. And x comes out to equal 144. Okay, so we got one piece down. What we can do is now we can go back and we can replace x with 144 because that might help us solve for another piece. Okay. In fact, I can see now that I think we can go back to pigs are awesome pets because now I have my 2 projections and now I can solve for my altitude. Okay. Also, if you notice, you don't have to use the proportions. If you take a look, your y is the last side of this right triangle with 65, 25, and y. You can put those pieces into the Pythagorean theorem. You just have to be careful. 65 has to go in for c because it's the hypotenuse of that right triangle. Okay. Or, like I said before, I'm going to use my proportions just because I want to keep practicing with them. So I'm going to use pigs are awesome pets, and so we're going to replace P1 with 25. Our altitude is y. That's what we're solving for. Same altitude of y. And now our projection 2 I just found is 144. I can now cross multiply and get y squared equals 25 times 144 is 3,600. I can then square root both sides, and y comes out to equal 60. Okay. And now I can put 60 in my picture, and I could, if you're looking at this right triangle now, okay, we have 2 sides that we know, the 60 and the 144, and we could use the Pythagorean theorem to solve for z. You would just have to be careful. Z is the hypotenuse, so you would be solving for c in your Pythagorean theorem. Okay. I'm going to use my last proportion just so I can practice. Okay. But I'm going to have to change these all to 2s now. So it'll be projection 2 over leg 2 equals leg 2 over hypotenuse. So my projection 2 is 144 over my leg 2, which is z, equal to the same leg 2, which is z, over my whole hypotenuse, which I do know. It's 25 plus 144, which is 169. And now I can cross multiply. And I end up with z squared equals 144 times 169 is a giant number, 24,336. And then square root and hope it's perfect. And it is. It's 156. And now I have all three pieces solved for. All right, I will see you guys on the back side of notes.